Start where you are. It's a phrase that sounds almost too simple, almost too obvious, yet it carries a depth of meaning that most of us overlook in the rush of daily life. How often do we find ourselves waiting for the perfect moment, for the ideal circumstances, for the exact combination of resources and timing to align before we feel ready to act? We convince ourselves that we need more experience, more education, more confidence, more money, more connections, more luck, or more clarity before we can move forward. We set up these conditions in our minds as prerequisites to taking action, and we wait, often for years, sometimes for decades, in the illusion that readiness is something that exists outside ourselves, in the external world, somewhere just beyond our reach, rather than within the moment we are already living. But the truth is, there will never be a perfect moment, and waiting for one is the fastest way to remain stagnant, to watch opportunities pass by, and to wonder later in life why progress never seemed to come. Start where you are, with what you have, because that is always enough. Your current skills, no matter how imperfect or incomplete they may seem, are the foundation from which growth begins. Your current mindset, even if filled with doubts or fears, can be adjusted and trained to serve you rather than hinder you. Your current circumstances, even if challenging or limited, can be navigated and leveraged to create momentum and results. Growth does not require ideal conditions. It requires the courage to act in the face of imperfection, to embrace the small steps that compound over time into meaningful progress. Consider the story of anyone you admire, anyone who has achieved success, mastery, or fulfillment. Rarely, if ever, did their journey begin under perfect circumstances. They began with what they had, with the knowledge, resources, and abilities that were accessible to them at that moment. They did not wait for everything to align perfectly. And because of that, they moved forward, learned, adapted, and grew. And that is the fundamental principle of starting where you are. It is not about having the perfect starting point. It is about starting at all, using the present moment as your launch pad, and committing to a process of consistent, intentional effort. Every choice you make today, no matter how small, shapes your trajectory tomorrow. Every action, no matter how seemingly insignificant, plants seeds that grow into competence, confidence, and opportunity. Waiting for the perfect moment is a way of avoiding responsibility, a way of hiding behind circumstances that are never truly in our control. But when you start where you are, you reclaim control over your life. You shift from being a passive observer of events to an active participant in your own growth. You stop waiting for someone else to give you permission, resources, or approval, and you begin creating your own momentum. This is the first step toward self-reliance, toward resilience, and toward the kind of progress that compounds exponentially over time. And starting where you are does not mean that you will never struggle or fail. It does not mean that the road ahead will be smooth or free from obstacles. In fact, it is precisely through engaging with the challenges and limitations you face in your current circumstances that growth occurs. Challenges reveal your strengths and weaknesses, push you to innovate, and force you to cultivate problem-solving skills and resilience that no ideal scenario could ever teach. The discomfort, the uncertainty, and even the mistakes you encounter along the way are all part of the process. They are not setbacks, but essential components of learning and mastery. The person who refuses to start because conditions are not perfect will never gain the experience, knowledge, and adaptability that come from doing, from testing, from iterating. Starting where you are is an act of courage because it requires you to take imperfect action, to risk failure, and to embrace the unknown. But it is also an act of empowerment because it returns to you the one thing that is always within your control, your choice to act. Each day that you delay, you sacrifice the potential gains that could have been achieved had you taken even a small step forward. Time is a resource that cannot be recovered, and every moment spent waiting for external conditions to improve is a moment lost in the pursuit of your goals, your growth, and your fulfillment. So, start where you are, and do not underestimate the power of small, consistent action. One small step taken today, no matter how minor it may seem, is far more impactful than a grand plan that remains unexecuted. Begin with what you know, with what you can do, and with the resources at hand. Learn as you go, adjust along the way, and trust that the process of taking action will teach you what you cannot learn by simply waiting. Starting where you are is also a lesson in self-compassion, because it encourages you to recognize your current limitations without judgment and to use them as a starting point, rather than as a reason for inaction. It teaches you to work with what is available, rather than lamenting what is missing. And in doing so, you cultivate a mindset of resourcefulness, creativity, and perseverance that will serve you far beyond the immediate steps you take. Life rarely gives perfect conditions, and waiting for them is a form of procrastination disguised as preparation. Progress favors the bold, the willing, and the proactive, not those who sit idle waiting for ideal circumstances. Every journey, no matter how long or difficult, begins with a single step, and that step is always taken from the present moment, from the reality you currently inhabit. By starting where you are, you honor your potential, you embrace the present, and you commit to the process of growth in a tangible, actionable way. It is the beginning of mastery, of resilience, and of a life shaped by intentional effort rather than by chance or circumstance. So stop waiting. Stop hoping for the perfect conditions. Start right here, right now, with what you have. Take that first action, however small it may seem, and trust that the momentum you create will carry you forward. Growth is not reserved for the prepared, the privileged, or the perfectly positioned. It is available to anyone willing to start where they are, to engage fully with the present, and to commit to consistent, purposeful effort. Remember, starting where you are is not just about doing something, it is about deciding that you will no longer let fear, doubt, or the illusion of perfect conditions hold you back. It is about recognizing that the tools, talents, and opportunities you possess today are sufficient to begin, to learn, and to grow. Each moment you act from where you are compounds into greater capability, greater confidence, and greater progress. And when you start where you are, something remarkable happens. The act of starting creates clarity, momentum, and insight, turning uncertainty into possibility and limitation into opportunity. So start now, with courage, with focus, and with the willingness to embrace imperfection, because it is in the act of starting and in the commitment to continue that growth truly begins. Growth begins with awareness. It begins with the willingness to look honestly at yourself, your habits, your routines, your choices, and the patterns that have shaped your life up to this moment. Awareness is not about criticism or self-condemnation. It is about seeing clearly, without illusions, without the filters of ego, excuses, or denial. Many of us go through life operating on autopilot, repeating behaviors, reacting in predictable ways, and yet we convince ourselves that change will somehow come from some external force, some magic moment, or some stroke of luck. But true growth cannot happen unless you first become aware of where you are, what you are doing, and why you are doing it. Awareness is the lens through which you begin to see reality as it is, not as you wish it were or as you fear it might be. It is the process of noticing the choices you make, both conscious and unconscious, and the impact they have on your life. It is understanding the habits that serve you and the ones that hold you back, and recognizing the recurring patterns that prevent you from moving forward. Without awareness, action is blind. You may try, you may plan, you may struggle, but your efforts are like navigating a dense forest. Without a compass you move, but you may never reach your destination efficiently, if at all. Developing awareness requires reflection, introspection, and a commitment to truth, even when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient. It asks you to pause, to observe, and to question yourself with curiosity rather than judgment. Why did I react that way? What motivated this decision? Where did my beliefs come from, and are they serving me? What are the stories I tell myself that keep me small or limit my potential? The answers to these questions illuminate not only your strengths and capabilities, but also the areas where you can improve, adapt, and grow. Awareness is also about recognizing your emotional landscape, understanding how your feelings influence your actions, and identifying the triggers that lead to patterns you no longer wish to repeat. It allows you to step out of reactive behaviors and enter a space of intentional response, where your actions are aligned with your goals and values rather than dictated by impulses, fear, or external pressures. It is the foundation of personal responsibility, because you cannot change what you refuse to see, and you cannot improve what you do not acknowledge. Awareness transforms confusion into clarity, chaos into insight, and inaction into intentional action. It gives you the power to choose, to decide, and to act in ways that are consistent with your vision for your life. Without it, you remain at the mercy of circumstance, drifting along currents you do not understand, and repeating the same mistakes without learning from them. And yet, awareness is not a one-time achievement. It is a continual practice, a daily discipline, a commitment to noticing the ebb and flow of your thoughts, actions, and experiences. It requires patience and honesty, because it is easy to deceive yourself or to settle for partial truths. Real awareness demands that you shine light into the shadowed corners of your mind. Acknowledge the uncomfortable truths about your limitations, your fears, and the ways in which you may have contributed to your own setbacks. It asks you to examine your relationships, your habits, and the systems you have created in your life to see where they serve you and where they hold you back. Awareness also means recognizing your successes, your progress, and the strengths you possess. It is not about focusing solely on flaws or failures. It is about understanding reality fully in its richness, complexity, and nuance. By becoming aware of both your strengths and weaknesses, you gain the ability to leverage what works, correct what doesn't, and make choices that are informed, deliberate, and effective. Awareness is the precursor to intentional change. It is the spark that ignites the engine of growth. Once you see clearly, you can act with purpose, set meaningful goals, and design strategies that align with your true potential. Without it, efforts are misdirected, energy is wasted, and opportunities are missed. Cultivating awareness also allows you to recognize the subtle ways in which your mindset shapes your experience. How you interpret events, how you perceive challenges, and how you respond to setbacks all stem from the narratives you hold in your mind. Awareness shines a light on these narratives, allowing you to question their validity, adjust your perspective, and choose interpretations that empower rather than limit you. It opens the door to self-mastery, because mastery begins with understanding yourself, your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and motivations. The more aware you are, the more control you have over the direction of your life. Awareness is also deeply connected to mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the moment. When you cultivate awareness, you notice not only your internal world, but also your external circumstances. You become attuned to opportunities that previously went unnoticed, to patterns in your environment, and to the effects of your actions on others. This level of observation allows you to make informed choices, respond effectively to challenges, and align your actions with your long-term vision. Importantly, awareness is not a passive activity. It requires engagement, reflection, and sometimes discomfort. It asks you to confront the parts of yourself that you may prefer to ignore, to face the habits and patterns that no longer serve you, and to take responsibility for your role in creating your current circumstances. It is not a skill you acquire overnight, but a lifelong practice that deepens with consistent effort and reflection. As you grow in awareness, you begin to notice the connections between your choices, actions, and outcomes. You see how small decisions compound over time, how repeated habits shape your life, and how your thoughts influence your reality. This understanding empowers you to make adjustments, break unhelpful patterns, and cultivate new habits that propel you forward. Awareness also teaches humility and patience because it reveals the complexity of life and the interplay of countless factors that shape your experiences. It reminds you that growth is a process, not an event, and that mastery is built gradually through observation, learning, and deliberate action. Ultimately, awareness is the key that unlocks your potential. It allows you to see yourself clearly, understand your circumstances, and act with intention. It transforms confusion into clarity, passivity into action, and potential into results. Without awareness, you drift. With awareness, you navigate. By committing to the practice of awareness, you lay the foundation for meaningful growth, lasting change, and a life of purpose. It is the first step toward working with what you have, improving what is within your control, and embracing the opportunities that are already present in your life. Awareness is the light that guides every subsequent step on the path of self-improvement, resilience, and achievement. Every habit you change, every decision you make, and every challenge you face begins with seeing clearly, understanding deeply, and knowing honestly where you are starting from. Growth begins with awareness, and awareness begins with the courage to look inward, to observe honestly, and to act deliberately, moment by moment, choice by choice, until the life you envision becomes the life you live. Our mindset determines your results, and yet so often we underestimate the quiet but profound power of the way we think, the narratives we hold, and the lens through which we view ourselves, others, and the world around us. Our mindset shapes our beliefs, informs our decisions, guides our actions, and ultimately dictates the outcomes we experience in life, because two people with similar skills, knowledge, and resources can face the same circumstances and achieve dramatically different results, depending entirely on how they interpret those circumstances, what they believe is possible, and how they respond to challenges, setbacks, and opportunities. A growth mindset sees challenges as opportunities to learn, failure as feedback rather than defeat, and effort as the pathway to mastery, whereas a fixed mindset views challenges as threats, failure as proof of inadequacy, and effort as a sign of insufficiency. And it is this internal framework, more than any external factor, that determines whether we stagnate or grow, whether we persevere or give up, whether we realize our potential or settle for less than we are capable of achieving. Mindset is not simply a passive state of mind. It is a dynamic, active lens that colors every perception, shapes every decision, and influences every action, whether we are aware of it or not. And developing a mindset that serves us requires conscious effort, reflection, and the willingness to challenge long-held beliefs, assumptions, and self-imposed limitations, because many of the constraints we feel are not imposed by reality, but by the stories we tell ourselves about what we can and cannot do, what is possible and what is impossible, and what we deserve or do not deserve. Cultivating a growth-oriented mindset begins with awareness, noticing when limiting beliefs arise, and questioning their validity. Asking yourself whether these thoughts are grounded in fact, or simply habits of thinking that keep you small, and replacing them with empowering beliefs that encourage curiosity, resilience, and perseverance. It requires embracing the idea that your abilities are not fixed, that intelligence, talent, and skill can be developed through effort, learning, and practice, and that every challenge faced and every mistake made is a critical opportunity for growth rather than a reflection of inherent limitation. Your mindset also shapes your responses to adversity, determining whether setbacks derail you or propel you forward. because a person with a resilient, growth-oriented mindset sees obstacles not as insurmountable walls, but as puzzles to solve, as signals to adapt, and as invitations to innovate, while a person with a fixed or negative mindset may see the same obstacles as proof that they are incapable, unlucky, or undeserving, creating a self-fulfilling cycle of frustration, avoidance, and stagnation that prevents progress and diminishes potential. Developing a strong, growth-focused mindset involves cultivating habits of reflection, self-talk, and perspective shifting, recognizing the language you use in your mind and the assumptions you make about your abilities, circumstances, and outcomes, and intentionally replacing self-limiting thoughts with constructive, empowering ones that guide your choices toward action, learning, and improvement. It also requires patience and persistence, because mindset is not something that changes overnight, but rather a lifelong practice, a continuous process of observing your internal dialogue, noticing when fear or doubt arises, and consciously choosing beliefs, attitudes, and interpretations that align with growth, possibility, and resilience. And over time, these small adjustments compound, transforming how you approach challenges, interact with others, and create opportunities in your life. Mindset shapes not only how we perceive obstacles, but also how we define success, what we consider failure, and how we respond to both. And by cultivating a perspective that sees progress rather than perfection, learning rather than judgment, and potential rather than limitation, we position ourselves to take consistent action, learn from mistakes, and adapt strategies in ways that accelerate growth, productivity, and fulfillment. The power of mindset extends beyond the individual, influencing relationships, collaboration, and communication, because the way we think about ourselves and others affects how we interact, the energy we bring to situations, and the expectations we hold for ourselves and those around us. And a mindset rooted in growth, empathy, and possibility fosters not only personal success, but also the ability to inspire, support, and elevate others, creating a positive cycle of influence and impact that extends beyond our immediate efforts. A strong mindset also encourages resilience in the face of uncertainty, ambiguity, and change, because life is unpredictable and often challenges us in ways we cannot anticipate, and it is the lens of mindset that determines whether we respond with fear, resistance, and withdrawal, or with curiosity, adaptability, and determination. Mindset equips us with the ability to reinterpret challenges as learning opportunities, setbacks as temporary, and obstacles as solvable, allowing us to maintain motivation, confidence, and clarity even in situations where circumstances are far from ideal. Developing this mindset requires practice, intentionality, and self-compassion, because it is easy to slip back into old thought patterns under stress, pressure, or disappointment. And part of growth is recognizing when these patterns emerge and gently redirecting our thinking toward beliefs and perspectives that serve our progress rather than hinder it. Mindset also interacts with our emotions, because the stories we tell ourselves influence our feelings, which in turn influence our actions, creating a feedback loop where empowering beliefs generate motivation, courage, and focus, while limiting beliefs generate doubt, hesitation, and avoidance. And the more aware we are of this connection, the more effectively we can manage our emotional responses, maintain clarity under pressure, and make decisions that align with long-term goals rather than short-term impulses. A growth-oriented mindset encourages lifelong learning, curiosity, and adaptability, allowing us to embrace new experiences, acquire new skills, and respond creatively to challenges, rather than resisting change or avoiding difficulty. And it recognizes that mastery is a process, not an endpoint, and that consistent effort, reflection, and adjustment lead to cumulative improvement over time. It also encourages self-efficacy, the belief that our actions matter, that we can influence outcomes, and that we have the power to shape our lives through deliberate choices, because when we believe in our ability to grow, learn, and adapt, we approach challenges with confidence, persistence, and strategic effort, and we are less likely to be paralyzed by fear, doubt, or the uncertainty of results. Cultivating a mindset that determines results also involves seeking feedback, being open to criticism, and using observations from our experiences to refine our approach, because growth is accelerated when we combine action with reflection, experimentation with learning, and persistence with adaptability, and each of these elements is guided and amplified by the mindset we choose to embrace. Ultimately, your mindset is the foundation upon which all other efforts, habits, and strategies are built, because no amount of skill, knowledge, or resourcefulness can compensate for a mindset that limits possibility, diminishes confidence, or interprets challenges as insurmountable, and conversely, a mindset oriented toward growth, resilience, and potential can amplify even modest abilities, resources, and opportunities into meaningful results, success, and fulfillment. Therefore, cultivating a mindset that determines your results is not optional for those who wish to grow, excel, and live intentionally. It is essential because it shapes the very way you perceive, interpret, and act in the world, influencing every decision, every action, and every outcome. And by consciously choosing to develop a mindset of growth, resilience, and possibility, you set yourself on a path where challenges become teachers, setbacks become feedback, and your potential is not limited by circumstance, fear, or self-doubt, but expanded by curiosity, effort, and belief in your capacity to grow and achieve. Perfection is a trap, a beautifully disguised form of procrastination that convinces us that we must wait, prepare, or achieve a flawless state before we can take meaningful action. And yet the pursuit of perfection often becomes the greatest obstacle to progress, because it immobilizes us in fear, doubt, and hesitation, leading to endless planning, overthinking, and avoidance while the world continues moving around us. Perfection makes us believe that our work, our efforts, and even our ideas are insufficient until they meet some impossible standard. Yet the reality is that perfect conditions, perfect timing, and perfect preparation rarely exist, and waiting for them guarantees that nothing will ever be accomplished. Growth, achievement, and fulfillment do not come from perfection. They come from action, effort, experimentation, and learning, from doing the work, making mistakes, adjusting, and trying again. And it is through this imperfect process that skill, mastery, and resilience are cultivated. Consider the countless innovations, achievements, and breakthroughs throughout history. Few, if any, were born of flawless execution from the start. Rather, they emerged from repeated effort, trial and error, adaptation, and the willingness to begin before all conditions were ideal. Because the act of starting generates momentum, reveals challenges, and teaches lessons that no amount of planning or waiting could provide. Perfectionism also fosters a fear of failure, because when we tie our self-worth or success to the notion of flawlessness, every mistake feels catastrophic, every criticism feels personal, and every setback threatens to undo our identity or aspirations, creating a paralyzing cycle that prevents experimentation, creativity, and growth. Yet failure, mistakes, and imperfection are not enemies. They are the very mechanisms by which we learn, improve, and achieve meaningful progress, because each attempt, regardless of outcome, provides insight, feedback, and experience that move us closer to mastery and understanding. To escape the trap of perfection, we must redefine our relationship with action, mistakes, and progress, recognizing that doing something, even imperfectly, is infinitely more productive than doing nothing while waiting for ideal conditions, and that each imperfect step contributes to momentum, skill development, and the accumulation of knowledge that ultimately leads to success. Perfection also distorts our perception of time and achievement, because we equate worthiness with flawlessness, delaying effort and undervaluing incremental progress. Yet life rewards those who act consistently, take risks, and embrace imperfection as part of the process, because it is through action that opportunities are discovered, relationships are built, and growth occurs. Escaping the perfection trap requires courage, the courage to start, to experiment, to fail, and to continue despite discomfort, criticism, and uncertainty. And this courage is strengthened each time we take imperfect action and witness progress, learn lessons, and adapt strategies. Perfectionism can also obscure priorities, as we spend excessive time polishing minor details, tweaking endlessly, or seeking validation for trivial aspects of our efforts, while the bigger, more meaningful actions that drive results are delayed or neglected. And recognizing this tendency allows us to shift focus toward high-impact activities, consistent execution, and the pursuit of progress over flawless presentation. Embracing imperfection does not mean abandoning quality or responsibility. Rather, it means understanding that excellence is achieved through iteration, practice, and learning, and that waiting for perfection is the enemy of improvement, because every completed effort provides a foundation for the next. Each lesson learned informs future decisions, and each risk taken expands confidence, competence, and resilience, creating a virtuous cycle that perfectionism obstructs. Perfectionism is also deeply tied to comparison, because when we measure ourselves against an idealized standard or the perceived successes of others, we inflate the importance of flawless execution and minimize the value of progress, growth, and effort. Yet learning to focus on our own journey, our own incremental improvement, and our own capacity for resilience allows us to break free from these unrealistic standards and to embrace a mindset of continuous learning, experimentation, and achievement. Furthermore, perfectionism undermines creativity and innovation because the fear of imperfection discourages experimentation, risk-taking, and exploration, whereas progress thrives in environments where mistakes are seen as opportunities, ideas are tested, and curiosity drives action. Because innovation emerges not from flawless conception, but from iteration, adaptation, and persistence in the face of uncertainty. Escaping the perfection trap also requires self-compassion, the understanding that mistakes, failures, and imperfections are not reflections of worthlessness, but are natural and necessary elements of the learning process. And by treating ourselves with kindness while holding ourselves accountable for action, we create a balance between responsibility and flexibility that fosters sustainable growth, resilience, and achievement. Perfectionism can further distort decision-making as we delay choices, overanalyze options, and seek certainty in an uncertain world. Yet embracing imperfection empowers decisive action, because we recognize that decisions are rarely perfect, that outcomes are unpredictable, and that learning from the consequences is more valuable than waiting for flawless certainty that may never come. Taking imperfect action also strengthens resilience, because encountering obstacles, navigating challenges, and recovering from mistakes teaches adaptability, problem-solving, and emotional fortitude that cannot be developed through planning alone. And it is these skills that sustain long-term growth, success, and fulfillment. Perfectionism can also create unnecessary stress and dissatisfaction as we constantly chase unattainable ideals, measure ourselves against unrealistic standards, and diminish the value of our efforts. Yet by embracing imperfection, we cultivate gratitude, patience, and acceptance of progress, recognizing that the journey itself, the act of doing, learning, and improving, is the true measure of growth, not the illusory standard of flawlessness. The key to overcoming perfectionism is to shift focus from outcomes to process, from flawless execution to deliberate action, from fear of failure to the courage to learn and adapt, and from waiting to acting, because it is in action, iteration, and persistence that true mastery, confidence, and accomplishment are realized. Starting before you are ready, experimenting before conditions are ideal, and taking risks despite uncertainty allows you to generate momentum, gather feedback, refine strategies, and achieve results that perfectionism would have delayed or prevented entirely. Embracing imperfection also enables authenticity because it allows us to engage fully with our strengths, weaknesses, and human limitations, creating genuine connections, learning from experiences, and growing in ways that are meaningful and sustainable, rather than chasing a false standard that diminishes satisfaction, engagement, and creativity. Perfectionism can obscure progress because we may fail to recognize the incremental steps we have taken, the lessons learned, and the growth achieved. Yet each imperfect action contributes to cumulative improvement, and by acknowledging and valuing these small victories, we build confidence, motivation, and momentum that fuels further effort, growth, and success. Ultimately, perfectionism is a barrier to action, a subtle form of resistance, and a limiter of potential, whereas embracing imperfection liberates us to start, learn, adapt, and grow, because life is not a contest of flawlessness, but a journey of exploration, persistence, and transformation, and it is through imperfect action, repeated effort, and resilience in the face of challenges that we achieve meaningful results, develop competence, and create the life we desire. The antidote to perfectionism is to commit to action, to embrace mistakes as teachers, to value progress over flawless performance, and to understand that every imperfect step moves us closer to mastery, confidence, and achievement. Because in the end, perfection is not required for success, growth, or fulfillment. Action, courage, and persistence are, and it is these qualities, cultivated through deliberate effort and the willingness to embrace imperfection, that determine the trajectory of our lives and the realization of our potential. Comparison is the thief of progress, an insidious habit that quietly erodes confidence, diminishes satisfaction, and blinds us to the unique opportunities, strengths, and experiences that are available to us. Because when we constantly measure ourselves against others, whether their achievements, their possessions, their skills, or even the curated highlights they present to the world, we distract ourselves from the only comparison that truly matters, the one with who we were yesterday, and the incremental growth that comes from focusing on our own journey. The problem with comparison is that it shifts attention outward to factors we cannot control, while diminishing our recognition of what is within our control, what we have already accomplished, and what steps we can take to continue moving forward. And in doing so, it fosters envy, self-doubt, and discouragement, while simultaneously masking the potential creativity and progress that exists within our own lives. Consider how often we scroll through social media, glance at a colleague's success, or hear about a friend's accomplishment and feel a pang of inadequacy, forgetting entirely that the paths, circumstances, and struggles that shaped their achievements are entirely different from ours, and that judging ourselves against someone else's results without understanding the full context is both unfair and counterproductive, because the only meaningful measure of progress is our own effort, growth, and ability to leverage what we already have to move forward. Breaking the habit of comparison requires deliberate awareness, because it is easy to fall into the trap unconsciously, internalizing subtle messages of inadequacy and shaping our self-perception around the perceived success of others. Yet the moment we notice this tendency, we reclaim power, recognizing that our value, potential, and progress are not diminished by the achievements of others, and that focusing on our own actions, learning, and incremental improvements is the path to meaningful growth. Comparison also undermines motivation, because when we perceive someone else as ahead or better, we may feel that our efforts are futile, that the gap is insurmountable, or that our progress will never measure up. Yet this perspective ignores the reality that every journey is unique, every pace is different, and consistent, deliberate effort on our part compounds over time, ultimately creating results that are entirely our own, and far more meaningful because they are built from our choices, resilience, and learning rather than imitation or chance. The antidote to comparison is self-focus, the conscious choice to measure progress against our own past actions, behaviors, and achievements, because this shifts attention inward, empowers accountability, and allows us to celebrate incremental growth, recognize lessons learned, and identify areas for improvement without the distortion created by external comparisons. Self-focus also cultivates gratitude, because when we direct attention to what we have, the skills we possess, and the progress we have made, we reinforce a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity, recognizing that our journey is valuable, unique, and worthy of effort and attention, rather than constantly measuring against a moving target defined by others. Comparison often distracts from effort because we become preoccupied with outcomes rather than the process, with results rather than the daily choices that lead to results, and with envy rather than engagement. And this shift in focus reduces the quality, consistency, and intentionality of our actions, which in turn slows progress and diminishes growth, whereas maintaining focus on our own process, habits, and development ensures that every step, however small, contributes meaningfully to the accumulation of skill, insight, and achievement. Breaking free from comparison also requires redefining success, because if success is defined externally, by what others have, what others achieve, or how we rank against peers, we relinquish control over our perception of value and fulfillment. Yet when success is defined internally, by personal growth, effort, resilience, and the pursuit of meaningful goals, we reclaim agency over our journey, reinforcing motivation, confidence, and persistence regardless of how others perform, and creating a framework in which progress is measurable, meaningful, and empowering. The habit of comparison also limits creativity because it encourages imitation, conformity, and fear of failure rather than experimentation, innovation, and authentic self-expression. And by releasing the need to measure up to others, we free ourselves to explore new approaches, test ideas, take risks, and embrace the unique contributions we can make to our work, relationships, and life, without being constrained by unrealistic standards or external expectations. Comparison is also a source of unnecessary emotional turbulence, because it generates feelings of inadequacy, envy, and frustration, all of which consume energy, cloud judgment, and distract from meaningful action. Yet by cultivating self-awareness and consciously redirecting attention to our own journey, we preserve emotional energy, strengthen resilience, and enhance clarity, allowing us to act decisively, embrace challenges, and persist in the pursuit of our goals without being derailed by external benchmarks. Overcoming comparison also requires patience, because growth is often slow, uneven, and invisible in the short term. Yet when we focus on our own incremental improvements, we recognize that progress is cumulative, that consistent effort compounds over time, and that the results we achieve will be authentic, meaningful, and sustainable precisely because they are earned through our own choices, actions, and persistence rather than borrowed from the paths of others. Self-compassion is another critical component, because comparison often triggers harsh self-judgment, criticism, and doubt. Yet by treating ourselves with kindness, acknowledging our efforts, and appreciating the progress we have made, we cultivate the confidence and motivation necessary to continue acting, learning, and growing, even when external comparisons might otherwise provoke discouragement. Embracing our individuality is also essential, because no two paths, talents, circumstances, or challenges are identical, and by valuing our unique journey, we foster authenticity, resilience, and self-trust, creating a foundation for growth that is independent of external validation or recognition, and that allows us to pursue meaningful goals with clarity, focus, and purpose. Comparison is often fueled by external noise, social media, peer pressure, or societal expectations. Yet by cultivating awareness and intentionally choosing the voices, messages, and influences we allow into our consciousness, we reduce the triggers for envy, distraction, and self-doubt, and we reinforce attention on our own actions, learning, and progress. thereby creating a mental environment conducive to growth, creativity, and fulfillment. Ultimately, the habit of comparison is a choice, because while it is natural to notice others, it is within our power to decide where to direct attention, how to interpret observations, and what metrics of success truly matter. And by consistently choosing to measure progress against our own efforts, learnings, and improvements, we reclaim agency, enhance motivation, and cultivate a mindset of abundance, resilience, and self-mastery. The act of releasing comparison also builds confidence, because each time we succeed on our own terms, overcome challenges independently, or achieve a goal through our own effort, we reinforce belief in our ability to grow, adapt, and create results, which in turn reduces the influence of external benchmarks on our self-perception and strengthens the internal validation that fuels continued effort. By focusing on our own journey, celebrating small wins, reflecting on lessons learned, and adjusting our actions with intentionality, we create a sustainable framework for growth, achievement, and fulfillment, one that is resilient to the distractions, pressures, and illusions created by comparison, and that allows us to fully leverage our unique strengths, resources, and experiences. The freedom from comparison is not about arrogance, entitlement, or ignoring opportunities to learn from others, but about prioritizing our own growth, focusing on what is within our control, and valuing incremental improvement over external validation. Because when our energy is directed toward action, learning, and progress, rather than envy, judgment, or imitation, we achieve far more than we could ever gain by measuring ourselves against others. In the end, comparison steals time, energy, focus, and confidence, while self-focus, awareness, and internal metrics of progress restore agency, motivation, and clarity. And by committing to this mindset, we free ourselves to grow at our own pace, achieve our own goals, and live a life defined not by the achievements of others, but by the meaningful progress, learning, and resilience that we cultivate through deliberate effort, intentional action, and an unwavering commitment to our own journey. Persistence matters more than talent, more than luck, more than fleeting inspiration, because the difference between those who achieve meaningful success and those who watch from the sidelines is not always innate ability or circumstance, but the willingness to continue, to endure, and to move forward even when progress seems slow, invisible, or uncertain. Persistence is the quiet, steady force that turns small, repeated efforts into mastery, that transforms mistakes into learning opportunities, and that bridges the gap between intention and accomplishment, because no amount of talent can substitute for the compounding effect of consistent action applied over time, and no level of inspiration can replace the grit required to overcome setbacks, distractions, or challenges that inevitably arise on the path to any significant goal. Consider the countless examples of individuals who achieved greatness. Their talent, while often notable, was amplified exponentially by persistence, because they continued showing up day after day, refining their craft, learning from failures, adjusting strategies, and refusing to surrender to frustration, discouragement, or fatigue. And it is this relentless commitment to action, rather than mere natural ability, that accounts for the majority of their success. Persistence is not a dramatic or glamorous trait. It is quiet, disciplined, and sometimes boring, requiring the ability to endure repetition, navigate obstacles, and maintain focus on long-term objectives despite short-term discomfort, distraction, or discouragement. And it is precisely this capacity to sustain effort over time, even when motivation ebbs and external validation is absent, that distinguishes those who achieve from those who quit. The power of persistence lies in its compounding effect, because small, consistent actions accumulate into results far greater than the sum of their individual parts, and even minor improvements applied steadily over weeks, months, and years create exponential growth, skill, and opportunity that cannot be achieved through sporadic bursts of effort or intermittent inspiration alone. To cultivate persistence, it is essential to develop a mindset that values process over instant results, that embraces incremental progress, and that recognizes setbacks not as failures, but as integral components of growth and refinement, because each obstacle overcome, each challenge navigated, and each adjustment made strengthens resilience, expands capability, and reinforces the belief that sustained effort produces meaningful outcomes. Persistence also requires a deep sense of purpose, because without a compelling reason to continue, effort can wane when the journey becomes difficult, and the ability to persist is magnified when anchored in personal values, meaningful goals, and the understanding that effort invested today, even when invisible, lays the foundation for future achievement, learning, and fulfillment. Challenges, delays, and unexpected obstacles are inevitable, yet persistent individuals see these not as reasons to stop, but as opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow stronger. Understanding that the path to mastery and success is rarely linear, and that resilience is developed most profoundly through enduring difficulties and continuing to act despite uncertainty or temporary setbacks. Persistence also fosters creativity and problem-solving, because the sustained engagement with a task, goal, or challenge allows for iterative experimentation, reflection, and refinement, revealing solutions that are invisible to those who abandon efforts prematurely. And cultivating a habit of persistence therefore enhances not only productivity, but also insight, innovation, and resourcefulness. Motivation alone is insufficient for lasting achievement, because motivation fluctuates based on mood, circumstances, or external reinforcement. Yet persistence is a skill that can be trained, strengthened, and applied consistently, independent of transient feelings or situational factors. And it is this ability to continue in the absence of immediate reward or recognition that ultimately defines the trajectory of success. The development of persistence is also intimately linked with the ability to manage discomfort, because every meaningful goal involves challenges, resistance, or periods of monotony, and those who endure, who maintain focus and action despite adversity, cultivate the resilience necessary to sustain effort over the long term, transforming challenges into catalysts for growth rather than deterrents that halt progress. Persistence builds confidence as well, because each step forward, each problem solved, and each obstacle overcome reinforces the belief in one's own capability to navigate difficulty, achieve results, and handle future challenges with increasing competence and assurance, creating a feedback loop where sustained effort strengthens ability, and strengthened ability motivates further effort. Moreover, persistence teaches patience, because results often lag behind effort, and the ability to maintain consistent action in the absence of immediate outcomes is essential for achieving long-term objectives, mastering complex skills, and creating lasting impact. It is through persistence that incremental gains accumulate into mastery, that repeated failures evolve into understanding, and that consistent effort transforms potential into tangible results, demonstrating that the journey itself, rather than fleeting talent or luck, is the primary determinant of accomplishment. Those who persist develop an intimate familiarity with the process of progress, learning to embrace iteration, failure, and refinement as integral components of growth, and in doing so, they cultivate a mindset of resilience, adaptability, and resourcefulness that positions them to navigate increasingly complex challenges and achieve results that might have seemed impossible at the outset. Persistence also fosters discipline, because the act of continuing despite fatigue, distraction, or discomfort strengthens habits, focus, and self-regulation, allowing individuals to execute consistently on long-term goals, prioritize effectively, and resist the temptation to abandon efforts when immediate gratification or comfort beckons. Cultivating persistence requires setting clear priorities, breaking goals into manageable steps, and committing to consistent action regardless of immediate outcomes. Understanding that meaningful success is rarely the result of sudden breakthroughs, but rather the culmination of countless small, deliberate actions sustained over time, and that the ability to maintain effort through difficulty is what separates those who achieve from those who stagnate. It also requires reframing challenges, mistakes, and setbacks as opportunities for learning, adaptation, and refinement, rather than as reasons to quit, because the resilient individual recognizes that each difficulty encountered is a teacher, each failure is feedback, and each adjustment strengthens the ability to navigate future obstacles with greater skill, insight, and confidence. Persistence is fundamentally a mindset, a choice to continue, and a commitment to acting consistently even when the path is uncertain, the outcomes are invisible, and the effort feels arduous. And by embracing this mindset, we reclaim control over our progress, shape our own trajectory, and cultivate the internal strength necessary to achieve sustained growth, mastery, and fulfillment. The compounding effect of persistence extends beyond immediate goals, because it trains character, patience, problem-solving, and resilience, creating the foundation for success in multiple areas of life. As the habits, mindset, and endurance developed through persistent effort in one domain translate to increased capability, confidence, and adaptability across all endeavors, persistence also enables us to navigate fear, doubt, and discouragement, because continued action builds proof of competence, reinforces belief in the ability to overcome challenges, and diminishes the power of internal and external obstacles that might otherwise derail progress, demonstrating that perseverance itself is a transformative force that shapes both results and character. Ultimately, persistence is the key to turning potential into achievement, intention into action, and dreams into reality, because talent alone is insufficient, inspiration alone is fleeting, and circumstances alone are unpredictable. But sustained, deliberate effort, applied consistently over time, yields outcomes that no amount of short-term brilliance or ideal conditions could replicate. And it is this steady, unwavering commitment to continue, to endure, and to act that forms the backbone of meaningful success, personal growth, and fulfillment in life, proving that those who persist, adapt, and maintain effort in the face of adversity will always surpass those who rely solely on talent, luck, or momentary motivation, because in the long run, persistence compounds, resilience accumulates, and the cumulative power of small, deliberate actions transforms not only results, but also the person taking them, shaping character, ability, and the trajectory of a life dedicated to growth, purpose, and meaningful accomplishment. Responsibility is the foundation of growth, the cornerstone of personal power, and the essential principle that separates those who achieve meaningful change from those who remain trapped in excuses, blame, and stagnation. Because when we refuse to take responsibility for our actions, choices, and circumstances, we relinquish control over our lives, leaving our progress and outcomes at the mercy of external factors, other people, and unpredictable events. Yet when we embrace responsibility fully, we reclaim agency, authority, and the ability to influence our own trajectory, understanding that no one else is responsible for our growth, our results, or the fulfillment of our potential, and that every decision, effort, and mindset shift we undertake is a deliberate act that shapes our present and future. Taking responsibility is not about guilt, shame, or self-condemnation. It is about acknowledging reality as it is, rather than as we wish it to be, and recognizing our role in creating the circumstances we experience, both positive and negative, because only through honest recognition of our contributions to outcomes can we learn, adapt, and improve. When we blame others, circumstances, or bad luck for our lack of progress, we remain powerless, trapped in a cycle of excuses that inhibits action, learning, and growth, because the mind focused on blame is a mind distracted from solutions, creativity, and strategic effort. Yet when we shift focus inward, examining what we can control, influence, and change, we unlock a vast reservoir of potential, resilience, and possibility that has been waiting to be activated. responsibility also requires the courage to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves, our habits, our decisions, and the patterns that have led to our current circumstances, because growth cannot occur in denial, and progress cannot be achieved without confronting the areas where we have fallen short, made mistakes, or neglected opportunities, and in doing so, we gain clarity about what actions, changes, and commitments are necessary to move forward intentionally and effectively. Embracing responsibility transforms challenges from obstacles into opportunities, because when we see life's difficulties not as punishments or unfair burdens, but as reflections of what is within our control, and as invitations to act, we shift from a reactive, victim-oriented mindset to a proactive, solution-oriented approach, where every challenge becomes a catalyst for learning, resilience, and self-improvement. It also fosters self-reliance, because the person who takes responsibility for their own growth understands that waiting for external validation, resources, or permission is futile, and that the power to create meaningful change resides within, in the deliberate choices we make, the actions we take, and the mindset we cultivate daily. Taking responsibility strengthens accountability, both to oneself and to others, because it requires honesty, integrity, and follow-through, and when we commit to our goals, admit mistakes, and correct course proactively, we not only accelerate personal growth, but also build trust, credibility, and influence in relationships, professional endeavors, and collaborative efforts, demonstrating that responsible individuals inspire confidence and respect through consistent, accountable action. Responsibility also amplifies learning, because it encourages reflection, analysis, and adjustment when outcomes do not meet expectations. Those who take responsibility examine their actions, decisions, and approach, asking what could have been done differently, what lessons can be learned, and how to improve moving forward, while those who blame external factors remain stagnant, repeating the same patterns without insight or progress. And the difference between the two approaches is the difference between growth and stagnation, mastery and mediocrity, fulfillment and frustration. Embracing responsibility involves letting go of excuses, rationalizations, and the need to assign fault externally, recognizing that while we cannot control every situation, we can control how we respond, what actions we take, and how we leverage available resources to create outcomes aligned with our goals. And this shift from external blame to internal agency empowers us to act decisively, persist through challenges, and optimize results, because control is reclaimed in the choices we make rather than in the actions of others. Responsibility is intimately connected with resilience, because the person who owns their circumstances develops the mental, emotional, and strategic fortitude to recover from setbacks, learn from failures, and continue acting with focus and determination, understanding that life is not about avoiding difficulties, but about navigating them skillfully, adapting, and maintaining forward momentum despite obstacles. And it is through this proactive engagement with reality that personal growth, competence, and achievement are realized. The practice of responsibility also enhances self-confidence, because each time we acknowledge our role in shaping outcomes, take corrective action, and experience progress as a result, we reinforce belief in our own ability to influence our life, navigate complexity, and achieve meaningful goals, creating a feedback loop in which responsibility cultivates competence and competence strengthens commitment to continued responsibility. Responsibility does not imply controlling every external factor or expecting perfection, but rather acting deliberately within the realm of influence we possess, focusing energy and attention on what we can change, and leveraging our decisions, effort, and mindset to create the best possible outcomes, because the alternative, blaming, avoiding, or waiting, ensures stagnation, frustration, and a life shaped by circumstance rather than choice. Taking responsibility also means acknowledging the ripple effects of our actions on others, understanding that our decisions, behaviors, and habits influence relationships, environments, and communities, and that ethical, intentional choices build trust, collaboration, and mutual benefit, whereas neglecting responsibility erodes relationships, credibility, and long-term potential. Embracing responsibility fosters problem-solving and creativity, because the mindset of ownership shifts the focus from complaints and obstacles to solutions, strategies, and alternatives, encouraging proactive thinking, experimentation, and innovation. And those who take responsibility are more likely to explore new approaches, adapt strategies, and create opportunities where others see limitations. It also encourages consistency, because responsible individuals recognize that results are the product of repeated, intentional actions rather than occasional bursts of effort, and they cultivate habits, routines, and discipline that sustain progress over time, reinforcing the principle that responsibility is not a one-time choice but an ongoing commitment to acting with awareness, integrity, and purpose in every aspect of life. Responsibility requires humility, because it demands that we confront mistakes, acknowledge limitations, and accept that outcomes are partially determined by our choices, yet it simultaneously empowers, because owning our actions, learning from them, and taking corrective measures is the path to mastery, growth, and fulfillment, demonstrating that true power resides not in avoiding accountability, but in embracing it fully. Responsibility is also liberating, because it releases us from the passive role of victim, from the endless cycle of blame, complaint, and external expectation, and positions us as active participants in shaping our life, our progress, and our destiny, reinforcing the principle that personal agency and consistent action are far more potent than circumstances, luck, or external approval. Developing responsibility is a practice that requires self-awareness, reflection, courage, and discipline, because we must continually monitor our actions, evaluate outcomes, learn from mistakes, and adjust strategies, and in doing so, we cultivate a mindset in which ownership, accountability, and deliberate action become habitual, automatic, and self-reinforcing, driving growth, resilience, and achievement. Ultimately, embracing responsibility transforms not only outcomes but also character, because it teaches integrity, discipline, resilience, problem-solving, and self-trust, creating a foundation for meaningful, sustainable success. And it is the individuals who consistently take responsibility, acknowledging reality, owning decisions, learning from failures, and acting deliberately, who unlock the power to influence their lives, realize their potential, and create results that are aligned with their goals, values, and aspirations, proving that responsibility is not a burden, but a source of empowerment, freedom, and enduring growth that enables us to navigate life with clarity, purpose, and unwavering agency. Focus is the bridge between intention and achievement, the powerful force that determines whether our efforts compound into meaningful results or dissipate into distraction. And yet so many of us underestimate its importance, allowing our attention to fragment across competing priorities, constant notifications, and the endless demands of modern life, forgetting that our ability to direct energy and concentration toward a single purpose is what transforms potential into accomplishment. Without focus, even the best ideas, the most rigorous plans, and the strongest skills fail to produce results, because energy scattered in multiple directions creates superficial engagement rather than deep, sustained action, and shallow effort rarely generates mastery, growth, or the transformative outcomes we desire. Focus is not merely the ability to pay attention, it is the intentional practice of aligning our thoughts, actions, and energy toward the most important objectives, maintaining clarity amid distractions, and resisting the temptation to pursue every fleeting interest, shiny opportunity, or external demand, because each deviation from purpose diminishes momentum, dilutes impact, and extends the time required to achieve meaningful progress. Cultivating focus requires clarity of priorities, because the mind cannot give itself fully to everything at once, and to harness its power effectively, we must identify what matters most, establish boundaries, and dedicate attention to the tasks, decisions, and actions that produce the greatest long-term value. Understanding that saying no to certain distractions, even appealing ones, is often as critical as saying yes to the opportunities that align with our goals. Focus also demands discipline, because sustained attention is rarely effortless, and the human mind is naturally drawn to novelty, stimulation, and immediate gratification. Yet the ability to maintain deliberate, consistent effort over time is what separates those who achieve meaningful results from those who drift aimlessly, pursuing activity rather than progress. Distractions are constant, external and internal alike, ranging from social media and environmental interruptions to wandering thoughts and emotional turbulence, and developing focus requires creating conditions that support deep engagement, including structured routines, intentional environments, and the management of mental and emotional states that can pull attention away from priority work, because focus is both a skill and a habit that strengthens with practice, consistency, and awareness. Focus amplifies productivity because it allows us to channel energy efficiently, complete tasks with greater speed and quality, and generate momentum through concentrated effort. Yet it also enhances creativity, because sustained engagement with a problem or goal allows the mind to notice patterns, make connections, and develop innovative solutions that fleeting attention or fragmented effort would never reveal, demonstrating that focus is not only about efficiency, but also about depth of understanding and capacity for insight. Developing focus also involves mindfulness, because the ability to remain present in the moment, observe thoughts without distraction, and redirect attention consciously is essential for resisting the pull of scattered stimuli, fleeting impulses, and habitual mental wandering. And mindfulness practices strengthen the neural pathways associated with sustained attention, mental clarity, and cognitive control, enabling higher performance across all areas of life. Focus requires the alignment of energy with purpose, because effort without direction dissipates, and intentional, goal-oriented focus ensures that each action contributes meaningfully to the overarching objectives, reinforcing the principle that quantity of effort is insufficient without quality of direction, and that sustained, purpose-driven attention is the multiplier that converts labor into impact. Focus is also an expression of self-responsibility, because it requires acknowledging the finite nature of time, attention, and energy, and making deliberate choices about how these resources are allocated, resisting the cultural and personal pressures to be constantly available, reactive, or entertained, and instead prioritizing the activities, relationships, and goals that produce enduring value and personal fulfillment. Focus develops resilience, because concentrated attention allows us to persist through challenges, setbacks, and complexity without succumbing to overwhelm, distraction, or discouragement, maintaining clarity of purpose and persistence of effort even when the path forward is unclear or difficult. And it is this sustained engagement that transforms obstacles into opportunities for learning, adaptation, and growth. Focus also strengthens decision-making, because a mind trained to concentrate on what truly matters can evaluate options with clarity, discern priorities with precision, and act with confidence rather than being swayed by irrelevant stimuli, short-term impulses, or external pressures, demonstrating that the quality of our focus directly influences the effectiveness of our choices and the results we generate. Cultivating focus requires recognizing and managing internal distractions, including fear, doubt, worry, and self-criticism, because the mind's attention is often hijacked by habitual negative thinking or mental clutter, and the practice of consciously observing these thoughts, letting them pass, and returning attention to the task at hand strengthens cognitive control and reinforces the habit of sustained concentration, enabling us to act more consistently, efficiently, and effectively. Focus is a multiplier of other skills, because knowledge, talent, planning, and effort are exponentially more impactful when applied with sustained attention and deliberate intention, whereas scattered effort diminishes returns, creates inefficiency, and limits growth, highlighting that focus is not merely a productivity tool, but a fundamental determinant of success, learning, and personal mastery. Focus also requires clarity of vision, because sustained attention is difficult to maintain without a compelling reason, a meaningful goal, and a concrete outcome to direct effort toward. And those who cultivate the habit of defining priorities, articulating objectives, and maintaining a clear sense of purpose are far more likely to sustain engagement, resist distraction, and translate intention into results over the long term. The cultivation of focus is an ongoing process because attention is a dynamic resource, constantly influenced by internal and external factors, and maintaining high-quality focus requires regular reflection, adjustment, and reinforcement of habits, routines, and environmental supports, ensuring that energy remains aligned with purpose, distractions are minimized, and deliberate action is consistently applied to what matters most. Focus is intimately connected with time management because the ability to concentrate attention on a task for a sustained period enhances efficiency, reduces wasted effort, and increases output. Yet true focus is not simply about scheduling or time allocation. It is about the mental clarity, intentionality, and presence that allow each moment to be utilized fully and meaningfully, converting time into results rather than mere business. Focus amplifies learning because concentrated attention on skills, knowledge, or experience accelerates understanding, retention, and application, allowing the individual to internalize insights, refine techniques, and adapt strategies more quickly than fragmented or superficial engagement, reinforcing the principle that deep, sustained attention is the engine of mastery. It also nurtures discipline and self-mastery, because the repeated practice of directing attention intentionally strengthens the mind's ability to resist distraction, delay gratification, and prioritize what truly matters. And over time, this capacity becomes habitual, creating a foundation for consistent achievement, resilience, and personal growth. Ultimately, focus is the key to converting intention into achievement, effort into results, and potential into realized outcomes, because it directs energy, sharpens action, and ensures that effort compounds meaningfully, demonstrating that those who cultivate the ability to sustain attention on what matters most consistently outperform those who are scattered, reactive, or easily distracted, and that the mastery of focus is not merely a skill, but a defining principle of personal power, agency, and long-term success, shaping the trajectory of our lives and determining the degree to which our goals, aspirations, and potential are fully realized. Consistency is the secret multiplier of success, the quiet force that transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary results, and yet it is often underestimated in a world that glorifies dramatic breakthroughs, sudden inspiration, and overnight success, because the reality is that long-term achievement is rarely the product of isolated brilliance or momentary motivation. Rather, it emerges from the disciplined, persistent application of effort over time, repeated with intention and aligned with meaningful goals. Because small, deliberate actions compounded day after day, week after week, and year after year build momentum, skill, and progress in ways that sporadic bursts of energy or occasional inspiration cannot. And it is this relentless, unwavering commitment to consistent action that distinguishes those who achieve from those who merely dream, plan, or wish for results. Consistency is not about perfection, nor is it about avoiding mistakes or setbacks. Because life is unpredictable and challenges are inevitable, yet the act of continuing, of showing up with effort, focus, and commitment despite obstacles, irregular results, or internal resistance, creates an unstoppable trajectory of growth, learning, and improvement that gradually compounds into mastery and accomplishment, demonstrating that persistence alone, applied consistently, is often more powerful than raw talent or fleeting inspiration. Developing consistency requires clarity of purpose, because repeated action without direction yields little more than busy work. Yet when effort is guided by defined priorities, meaningful objectives, and a deliberate plan of action, each repetition contributes to tangible progress, reinforcing motivation, skill, and confidence, and generating the compounding effects that ultimately produce remarkable outcomes. Consistency is also a habit, a practice of aligning behavior with intention over time, and like any habit, it requires conscious cultivation, disciplined reinforcement, and the willingness to act even when motivation wanes, when the work feels tedious, or when immediate results are invisible, because true consistency is sustained through commitment to process, rather than reliance on transient feelings of enthusiasm or excitement. And it is in this disciplined repetition that mastery, credibility, and meaningful achievement are formed. The power of consistency lies not only in its ability to accumulate effort and results, but also in its capacity to create trust, credibility, and reliability, because those who act consistently, deliver reliably, and follow through on commitments demonstrate integrity and earn confidence from themselves and others. While inconsistency erodes credibility, undermines progress, and diminishes influence, highlighting that the habit of showing up consistently shapes not only outcomes but also relationships, reputation, and long-term opportunity. Consistency also nurtures resilience, because regular engagement with challenges, tasks, and responsibilities strengthens the mind's ability to endure setbacks, maintain focus, and persist through difficulty, reinforcing the principle that repeated, deliberate effort under varying conditions builds adaptability, skill, and confidence, while sporadic effort leaves the individual unprepared for adversity and vulnerable to discouragement. It is important to understand that consistency is not about rigidity or repetition for its own sake, but about sustained, purposeful action aligned with meaningful goals, because mindless repetition can lead to stagnation, whereas intentional, goal-oriented consistency ensures that each action contributes to progress, learning, and measurable outcomes, creating a trajectory that moves steadily forward even when the path is challenging, uncertain, or slow. Consistency amplifies other skills and habits, because the repeated application of effort strengthens discipline, focus, resilience, and problem-solving ability, and it is through this compounded practice that competence, confidence, and expertise are developed, demonstrating that excellence is not a sudden event, but the result of repeated, deliberate effort applied over time, gradually transforming potential into tangible achievement. The practice of consistency also builds momentum, because repeated action creates forward motion that reduces resistance, strengthens motivation, and reinforces the habit of engagement, making it easier to continue acting even when the initial energy, enthusiasm, or external support diminishes. And this momentum is a key factor in sustaining progress, overcoming challenges, and achieving long-term goals. Cultivating consistency requires self-awareness, because it is easy to drift into inconsistent behaviors due to distraction, procrastination, or shifting priorities, and maintaining deliberate effort demands regular reflection, adjustment, and recommitment to ensure that energy is directed toward what matters most, reinforcing the alignment of action with intention and purpose. Consistency also fosters patience, because the results of sustained effort are often delayed, invisible, or gradual, yet the individual committed to repeated, purposeful action understands that lasting achievement is built over time, and that the compounding effect of daily, intentional effort far outweighs the appeal of immediate gratification or sporadic bursts of productivity, creating a mindset in which delayed rewards are accepted as part of the natural rhythm of growth, learning, and success. The power of consistency extends to skill development, because deliberate repetition allows for refinement, learning, and incremental improvement, and each iteration provides feedback that informs subsequent action, deepens understanding, and strengthens competence, demonstrating that mastery is rarely the product of genius or luck, but of persistent, focused engagement over time. Consistency also reinforces confidence, because each completed task, each repeated effort, and each incremental success provides evidence of capability, reliability, and progress, strengthening belief in one's ability to achieve, adapt, and grow, and creating a positive cycle in which consistent action fuels motivation, skill, and results, which in turn reinforce further effort and commitment. Embracing consistency requires the courage to act despite discomfort, monotony, or resistance, because the habit of showing up day after day often involves overcoming internal objections, distractions, or doubts. Yet this very process develops resilience, mental toughness, and the capacity to act with discipline, regardless of external conditions or internal emotional states, which are essential qualities for sustained achievement and long-term growth. Consistency is also a principle of leverage, because small, repeated actions compound over time to produce results exponentially greater than isolated efforts. And it is this accumulation of incremental progress, applied faithfully and persistently, that allows ordinary actions to generate extraordinary outcomes, demonstrating that success is rarely sudden, but the cumulative product of continuous, intentional engagement. The practice of consistency also fosters accountability, because regular, repeated effort requires self-monitoring, commitment to follow through, and alignment between intention and action, creating a framework in which progress is observable, measurable, and self-reinforcing, and where deviation from goals is recognized and corrected proactively, reinforcing discipline, responsibility, and personal integrity. Consistency strengthens adaptability, because the act of showing up regularly exposes the individual to a variety of challenges, feedback, and evolving circumstances, allowing for continuous learning, adjustment, and improvement. And it is through this iterative process that both competence and flexibility are enhanced, preparing the individual to navigate complex, unpredictable environments with confidence and skill. Ultimately, consistency is the engine that converts effort into achievement, intention into action, and potential into realized results, because without repeated, deliberate action, even the most promising ideas, intentions, or talents remain dormant, and it is only through the daily practice of showing up, committing, and following through that meaningful progress accumulates, momentum is built, and mastery is achieved, proving that the quiet, often overlooked force of consistency is the true multiplier of success, shaping not only outcomes but character, resilience, and the trajectory of a life lived with purpose, discipline, and deliberate action. Action is the bridge between dreams and reality, the essential force that converts intention, knowledge, and planning into tangible results, because no matter how clear our vision, how detailed our plan, or how well prepared we may feel, without deliberate, consistent action, potential remains unfulfilled and goals remain distant, abstract concepts, and yet so many people fall into the trap of waiting for the perfect moment, believing that readiness, resources, or ideal conditions must precede action, when in truth, readiness is created through engagement, confidence is built through experience, and conditions improve as a result of effort applied. Because action is not merely a step toward achievement, it is the catalyst that generates momentum, uncovers opportunity, and teaches lessons that cannot be learned from planning alone. And the act of starting, even imperfectly, even hesitantly, sets in motion a process that gradually transforms uncertainty into clarity, possibility into results, and intention into measurable progress. Action is inherently transformative, because it requires decision, commitment, and courage, compelling us to move beyond thought and into practice. And it is through this transition that ideas are tested, skills are honed, and growth occurs, because theory alone cannot produce competence, confidence, or mastery, and without the tangible application of effort, knowledge remains inert and potential untapped, leaving individuals frustrated by unfulfilled aspirations and dreams postponed indefinitely. The power of action lies not only in its immediate effects, but also in its cumulative impact over time, because repeated, deliberate actions compound, building skill, experience, and results exponentially, and each completed effort, no matter how small, contributes to a trajectory of progress that grows more powerful with persistence, illustrating that the act of doing consistently, over time, is the primary determinant of success, while inaction guarantees stagnation regardless of intention or preparation. Taking action requires overcoming resistance, fear, and doubt, because the mind naturally seeks comfort, certainty, and avoidance of risk. Yet it is precisely by confronting these internal barriers, stepping into discomfort, and moving forward despite uncertainty that we build resilience, confidence, and capability, learning that action is both a means of navigating challenges and a teacher that provides feedback, insight, and opportunity, demonstrating that progress is inseparable from the courage to act even when outcomes are uncertain or imperfect. Action is also a form of accountability, because each step taken creates evidence of effort and commitment, reinforcing self-trust, discipline, and integrity, and signaling to ourselves and others that we are serious about our goals, our responsibilities, and our growth. While the absence of action erodes confidence, breeds self-doubt, and undermines the very foundation of potential and ambition, furthermore, action reveals gaps in knowledge, skill, and preparation, providing real-time feedback that enables learning, adaptation, and improvement, because challenges encountered during the process expose weaknesses that theoretical preparation or planning cannot anticipate. And the willingness to act despite imperfect understanding accelerates growth by transforming mistakes into valuable lessons, refining strategy, and expanding capability, illustrating that action is inseparable from learning, and that mastery develops through the iterative cycle of doing, reflecting, and adjusting. The habit of action also amplifies momentum, because each completed step creates energy, motivation, and forward motion that propels subsequent effort, demonstrating that the psychological and practical benefits of doing extend beyond the immediate task, reinforcing persistence, focus, and engagement, and reducing the inertia that often keeps people trapped in procrastination, indecision, or overthinking, highlighting that progress is both psychological and practical, and the simple act of moving forward catalyzes further movement. Action is inherently empowering because it restores agency, reminding us that we are not passive observers of circumstance, but active participants in shaping outcomes, and this empowerment reinforces the belief in our ability to influence our life, navigate challenges, and create meaningful results, instilling a mindset of possibility, responsibility, and resilience that fuels continued effort and growth, demonstrating that action is as much about mindset as it is about tangible outcomes. Moreover, action creates opportunity because engagement in the real world generates feedback, connections, and possibilities that remain invisible when we remain idle, hesitant, or overly cautious, and those who consistently act are far more likely to encounter resources, relationships, and chances to grow, succeed, and innovate than those who wait for ideal conditions or perfect preparation, illustrating that initiative, courage, and movement are prerequisites for meaningful opportunity. Taking action requires clarity, because unfocused, scattered activity produces little impact and often leads to exhaustion or frustration, and deliberate, purpose-driven action ensures that energy is applied strategically toward goals, tasks, and decisions that generate the greatest long-term benefit, reinforcing the principle that the quality, alignment, and intentionality of action matter as much as its frequency, and that mindful, sustained effort maximizes returns. Action also mitigates fear, because hesitation, procrastination, and overthinking amplify anxiety, uncertainty, and self-doubt, whereas movement, even incremental, reduces the perceived immensity of a challenge, builds confidence, and provides evidence that problems are solvable and goals are achievable, teaching that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in its presence, and that momentum is created by starting rather than waiting. Action cultivates discipline and habit because repeated engagement with important tasks strengthens routines, reinforces persistence, and trains the mind and body to respond proactively rather than reactively, creating an internal system in which effort becomes automatic, consistent, and self-reinforcing, and where results are the inevitable product of repeated, deliberate choice rather than occasional inspiration. Furthermore, action fosters learning agility because each step taken produces feedback, reveals unexpected variables, and exposes blind spots that refine judgment, strategy, and skill, demonstrating that those who act regularly learn more quickly, adapt more effectively, and achieve more consistently than those who remain in the realm of thought or intention alone, proving that knowledge without application is inert, and that experience gained through action accelerates growth exponentially. Taking action also strengthens resilience, because facing challenges, making mistakes, and navigating obstacles teaches problem-solving, adaptability, and emotional fortitude, and each successful navigation reinforces belief in the ability to overcome future difficulties, creating a compounding effect in which action builds competence, and competence strengthens the motivation and confidence to continue acting despite difficulty, uncertainty, or temporary failure. Action is essential for building credibility because consistent, deliberate effort produces results that others notice, trust, and rely upon, and those who consistently follow through on commitments earn influence, respect, and opportunities that cannot be gained through intention or promise alone, illustrating that reputation, trust, and leadership are grounded in visible, tangible action. It is important to recognize that action is not synonymous with mindless business, impulsive behavior, or reactive movement. Rather, effective action is deliberate, purposeful, and aligned with clear priorities, ensuring that effort generates meaningful progress and contributes to long-term goals, because the combination of consistency, focus, and intentionality determines whether action is productive, transformative, and impactful. Ultimately, action is the engine of growth, learning, and achievement because it converts ideas, plans, and intentions into reality, transforms obstacles into opportunities, and compounds over time into mastery, competence, and results, demonstrating that those who consistently act, even imperfectly, will always outperform those who wait for certainty, ideal conditions, or fleeting inspiration, and that the act of doing, persistent, intentional, and courageous, is the single most powerful lever we possess to create the life we desire, realize our potential, and translate vision into measurable, meaningful outcomes. Mindset is the lens through which we interpret every experience, the internal architecture that shapes perception, reaction, and ultimately, the trajectory of our lives, because the way we think about challenges, opportunities, failures, and successes determines the quality of our decisions, the persistence of our effort, and the degree to which we are able to grow, adapt, and thrive. And yet so many people underestimate its power, allowing limiting beliefs, self-doubt, or past experiences to unconsciously dictate their actions, reactions, and sense of possibility, thereby restricting potential and trapping themselves in cycles of frustration, stagnation, or fear. Cultivating a growth-oriented mindset is not about blind optimism or wishful thinking. It is about developing the internal framework that recognizes challenges as opportunities, setbacks as feedback, and effort as the primary mechanism for improvement, because those who approach life with a mindset anchored in learning, adaptability, and resilience are far more likely to persist through difficulty, absorb lessons from failure, and leverage experience into sustained progress than those who believe that abilities, circumstances, or outcomes are fixed and unchangeable. Mindset influences behavior at every level, from the decisions we make to the habits we form, because the beliefs we hold about our capabilities, resources, and the potential for change directly affect whether we take action, embrace risk, or persist through difficulty. And it is through the cultivation of empowering beliefs that individuals gain the courage, focus, and resilience necessary to navigate uncertainty and achieve meaningful outcomes. A strong, growth-focused mindset also shapes how we perceive obstacles, because rather than interpreting difficulties as insurmountable barriers, setbacks as proof of inadequacy, or mistakes as personal failures, we learn to view them as essential feedback mechanisms, sources of information and opportunities for adaptation, which in turn fosters persistence, creative problem-solving, and strategic adjustment, demonstrating that the quality of our internal lens dictates the efficiency, resilience, and effectiveness of our external efforts. Mindset is deeply intertwined with self-talk, because the narrative we construct about ourselves, our abilities, and our circumstances has a profound effect on confidence, motivation, and engagement. And when we actively replace negative, limiting, or self-critical thoughts with constructive, empowering, and solution-oriented narratives, we not only improve our emotional state, but also enhance our capacity to act, persist, and achieve, illustrating that internal dialogue is a practical tool for shaping both perception and outcome. Cultivating a strong mindset requires deliberate attention to beliefs, patterns, and assumptions, because many mental habits are formed unconsciously over time, influenced by past experiences, societal expectations, and cultural norms, and it is only through conscious reflection, analysis, and adjustment that limiting frameworks can be replaced with empowering ones, enabling us to reinterpret challenges, reframe setbacks, and embrace possibilities that previously seemed unattainable, demonstrating that mindset is not fixed but malleable, and that intentional effort can restructure mental frameworks to align with growth, resilience, and long-term success. Mindset also determines the level of personal responsibility we assume, because individuals with an empowered mindset recognize their role in shaping outcomes, rather than attributing failure to external forces, circumstances, or other people, and this recognition fuels action, learning, and adaptation, while a fixed or disempowered mindset fosters blame, avoidance, and stagnation, reinforcing the principle that how we interpret events and assign responsibility directly impacts both behavior and results. Mindset shapes the perception of time, because a growth-oriented perspective allows us to value incremental progress, consistent effort, and long-term development over instant gratification, short-term wins, or external validation, and this long-term focus promotes patience, discipline, and sustained engagement, enabling the compounding of skill, knowledge, and achievement over months and years, which is often the defining factor between those who achieve significant success and those who do not. Mindset also influences emotional regulation, because how we interpret setbacks, criticism, and uncertainty dictates our responses, resilience, and adaptability, and a flexible, growth-focused mindset allows for constructive handling of stress, frustration, and disappointment, transforming potential derailments into opportunities for learning, adjustment, and growth, while a rigid or negative mindset magnifies stress, fear, and discouragement, impairing decision-making, action, and progress. Mindset affects creativity and problem-solving, because individuals who believe that solutions are discoverable, skills are improvable, and obstacles are navigable are far more likely to experiment, innovate, and persist through uncertainty than those who perceive challenges as fixed or insurmountable, illustrating that our cognitive framework directly influences not only what we attempt, but also how effectively we navigate complexity, generate alternatives, and leverage opportunities. Cultivating mindset requires self-awareness and reflection, because recognizing patterns of thought, automatic assumptions, and habitual reactions allows for conscious adjustment, reframing, and realignment with empowering beliefs. And it is through this continuous cycle of observation, reflection, and adjustment that we strengthen our capacity for adaptive thinking, resilience, and deliberate action, demonstrating that mindset is both the foundation and the engine of sustained personal growth. Mindset is a lens for interpreting feedback because the same event, a mistake, a critique, or an unexpected outcome, can either be internalized as failure, discouragement, or confirmation of limitation, or as a source of insight, learning, and strategic adjustment, and those who consistently choose the latter approach develop a compounding advantage in skill acquisition, confidence, and problem-solving, highlighting that the quality of interpretation is a key determinant of long-term growth. Mindset is also linked to self-efficacy because believing in one's ability to influence outcomes, navigate challenges, and learn from experience creates the confidence to act, persist, and embrace opportunities that others may avoid due to fear or doubt. And it is this belief in personal capability, reinforced by repeated action and reflection, that fuels achievement, resilience, and mastery, demonstrating that mindset directly shapes both initiative and results. Mindset can be strengthened through deliberate practices, including visualization, affirmations, reflective journaling, reframing of limiting beliefs, exposure to growth-oriented influences, and intentional engagement with challenges that stretch capability, because repeated practice and reinforcement of empowering cognitive patterns restructure neural pathways, making adaptive, resilient, and solution-focused thinking increasingly automatic, which in turn enhances performance, decision-making, and persistence over time. Mindset influences the perception of risk and failure, because individuals with growth-oriented beliefs see uncertainty as an opportunity for learning, experimentation, and development rather than as a threat. And this perspective encourages calculated action, innovation, and adaptability, allowing them to pursue meaningful goals with courage, creativity, and resilience, while those with a fixed or disempowered mindset avoid action, resist change, and limit potential due to fear of imperfection or loss. Ultimately, mindset is the internal architecture that governs perception, behavior, and results, because it shapes how we interpret experiences, respond to challenges, and allocate effort. And cultivating a growth-oriented, resilient, and empowered mindset is the single most impactful leverage point for sustained personal development, achievement, and fulfillment, demonstrating that the lens through which we view life determines not only what we attempt, but also what we accomplish, the obstacles we overcome, and the trajectory of our entire journey. In essence, mindset is the foundation upon which all other principles, action, consistency, focus, persistence, responsibility, and learning, rest, because without a framework of beliefs that supports growth, resilience, and empowerment, even the most disciplined effort, informed planning, or courageous action will be limited by self-imposed boundaries, internal resistance, and unproductive interpretation, illustrating that to cultivate lasting progress, fulfillment, and impact, we must first master the internal landscape of thought, belief, and perception, ensuring that our mind works as a tool of empowerment, adaptation, and opportunity rather than as a filter of limitation, fear, or self-doubt, because the quality of our mindset ultimately determines the quality, scale, and trajectory of our life. Mindset is the lens through which we interpret every experience, the internal architecture that shapes perception, reaction, and ultimately the trajectory of our lives, because the way we think about challenges, opportunities, failures, and successes determines the quality of our decisions, the persistence of our effort, and the degree to which we are able to grow, adapt, and thrive. And yet so many people underestimate its power, allowing limiting beliefs, self-doubt, or past experiences to unconsciously dictate their actions, reactions, and sense of possibility, thereby restricting potential and trapping themselves in cycles of frustration, stagnation, or fear. Cultivating a growth-oriented mindset is not about blind optimism or wishful thinking. It is about developing the internal framework that recognizes challenges as opportunities, setbacks as feedback, and effort as the primary mechanism for improvement, because those who approach life with a mindset anchored in learning, adaptability, and resilience are far more likely to persist through difficulty, absorb lessons from failure, and leverage experience into sustained progress than those who believe that abilities, circumstances, or outcomes are fixed and unchangeable. Mindset influences behavior at every level, from the decisions we make to the habits we form, because the beliefs we hold about our capabilities, resources, and the potential for change directly affect whether we take action, embrace risk, or persist through difficulty, and it is through the cultivation of empowering beliefs that individuals gain the courage, focus, and resilience necessary to navigate uncertainty and achieve meaningful outcomes. A strong, growth-focused mindset also shapes how we perceive obstacles, because rather than interpreting difficulties as insurmountable barriers, setbacks as proof of inadequacy, or mistakes as personal failures, we learn to view them as essential feedback mechanisms, sources of information, and opportunities for adaptation, which in turn fosters persistence, creative problem-solving, and strategic adjustment, demonstrating that the quality of our internal lens dictates the efficiency, resilience, and effectiveness of our external efforts. Mindset is deeply intertwined with self-talk, because the narrative we construct about ourselves, our abilities, and our circumstances has a profound effect on confidence, motivation, and engagement, and when we actively replace negative, limiting, or self-critical thoughts with constructive, empowering, and solution-oriented narratives, we not only improve our emotional state, but also enhance our capacity to act, persist, and achieve, illustrating that internal dialogue is a practical tool for shaping both perception and outcome. Cultivating a strong mindset requires deliberate attention to beliefs, patterns, and assumptions, because many mental habits are formed unconsciously over time, influenced by past experiences, societal expectations, and cultural norms, and it is only through conscious reflection, analysis, and adjustment that limiting frameworks can be replaced with empowering ones, enabling us to reinterpret challenges, reframe setbacks, and embrace possibilities that previously seemed unattainable, demonstrating that mindset is not fixed but malleable, and that intentional effort can restructure mental frameworks to align with growth, resilience, and long-term success. Mindset also determines the level of personal responsibility we assume, because individuals with an empowered mindset recognize their role in shaping outcomes, rather than attributing failure to external forces, circumstances, or other people, and this recognition fuels action, learning, and adaptation, while a fixed or disempowered mindset fosters blame, avoidance, and stagnation, reinforcing the principle that how we interpret events and assign responsibility directly impacts both behavior and results. Mindset shapes the perception of time, because a growth-oriented perspective allows us to value incremental progress, consistent effort, and long-term development over instant gratification, short-term wins, or external validation, and this long-term focus promotes patience, discipline, and sustained engagement, enabling the compounding of skill, knowledge, and achievement over months and years, which is often the defining factor between those who achieve significant success and those who do not. Mindset also influences emotional regulation, because how we interpret setbacks, criticism, and uncertainty dictates our responses, resilience, and adaptability, and a flexible, growth-focused mindset allows for constructive handling of stress, frustration, and disappointment, transforming potential derailments into opportunities for learning, adjustment, and growth, while a rigid or negative mindset magnifies stress, fear, and discouragement, impairing decision-making, action, and progress. Mindset affects creativity and problem-solving, because individuals who believe that solutions are discoverable, skills are improvable, and obstacles are navigable are far more likely to experiment, innovate, and persist through uncertainty than those who perceive challenges as fixed or insurmountable, illustrating that our cognitive framework directly influences not only what we attempt, but also how effectively we navigate complexity, generate alternatives, and leverage opportunities. Cultivating mindset requires self-awareness and reflection, because recognizing patterns of thought, automatic assumptions, and habitual reactions allows for conscious adjustment, reframing, and realignment with empowering beliefs, and it is through this continuous cycle of observation, reflection, and adjustment that we strengthen our capacity for adaptive thinking, resilience, and deliberate action, demonstrating that mindset is both the foundation and the engine of sustained personal growth. Mindset is a lens for interpreting feedback, because the same event, a mistake, a critique, or an unexpected outcome, can either be internalized as failure, discouragement, or confirmation of limitation, or as a source of insight, learning, and strategic adjustment. And those who consistently choose the latter approach develop a compounding advantage in skill acquisition, confidence, and problem-solving, highlighting that the quality of interpretation is a key determinant of long-term growth. Mindset is also linked to self-efficacy, because believing in one's ability to influence outcomes, navigate challenges, and learn from experience creates the confidence to act, persist, and embrace opportunities that others may avoid due to fear or doubt. And it is this belief in personal capability, reinforced by repeated action and reflection, that fuels achievement, resilience, and mastery, demonstrating that mindset directly shapes both initiative and results. Mindset can be strengthened through deliberate practices, including visualization, affirmations, reflective journaling, reframing of limiting beliefs, exposure to growth-oriented influences, and intentional engagement with challenges that stretch capability, because repeated practice and reinforcement of empowering cognitive patterns restructure neural pathways, making adaptive, resilient, and solution-focused thinking increasingly automatic, which in turn enhances performance, decision-making, and persistence over time. Mindset influences the perception of risk and failure, because individuals with growth-oriented beliefs see uncertainty as an opportunity for learning, experimentation, and development rather than as a threat, and this perspective encourages calculated action, innovation, and adaptability, allowing them to pursue meaningful goals with courage, creativity, and resilience, while those with a fixed or disempowered mindset avoid action, resist change, and limit potential due to fear of imperfection or loss. Ultimately, mindset is the internal architecture that governs perception, behavior, and results, because it shapes how we interpret experiences, respond to challenges, and allocate effort. And cultivating a growth-oriented, resilient, and empowered mindset is the single most impactful leverage point for sustained personal development, achievement, and fulfillment, demonstrating that the lens through which we view life determines not only what we attempt, but also what we accomplish, the obstacles we overcome, and the trajectory of our entire journey. In essence, mindset is the foundation upon which all other principles, action, consistency, focus, persistence, responsibility, and learning, rest, because without a framework of beliefs that supports growth, resilience, and empowerment, even the most disciplined effort, informed planning, or courageous action will be limited by self-imposed boundaries, internal resistance, and unproductive interpretation, illustrating that to cultivate lasting progress, fulfillment, and impact, we must first master the internal landscape of thought, belief, and perception, ensuring that our mind works as a tool of empowerment, adaptation, and opportunity rather than as a filter of limitation, fear, or self-doubt, because the quality of our mindset ultimately determines the quality, scale, and trajectory of our life. Habits are the invisible architecture of our lives, the recurring behaviors and routines that shape outcomes, influence decisions, and define the trajectory of personal growth and achievement, because while goals and intentions provide direction, It is the repeated actions embedded in daily habits that translate vision into results, and yet so often we underestimate their power, focusing on motivation, inspiration, or occasional effort rather than the compounding effects of consistent behavior over time. And this oversight is the primary reason many fail to reach their potential despite having clear objectives and strong intentions. Habits are powerful because they operate largely outside of conscious thought, guiding behavior automatically, conserving mental energy, and creating predictable patterns of action that either advance our goals or undermine them, depending on whether they are intentional, aligned with purpose, and optimized for growth. And the difference between thriving and stagnation is often found not in dramatic effort, but in the quality and consistency of our habitual choices. The cultivation of effective habits requires deliberate attention to triggers, routines, and rewards, because habits form through repeated cycles of cue, action, and reinforcement, and understanding this mechanism allows us to design behaviors that become self-sustaining, automatic, and aligned with long-term objectives, demonstrating that intentional habit formation is both a science and an art, and that mastery over daily behaviors is a prerequisite for mastery over results. Habits shape identity, because the small actions repeated consistently over time communicate to ourselves who we are and what we value, reinforcing beliefs about capability, discipline, and self-efficacy. And each intentional habit strengthens the internal narrative that supports growth, resilience, and achievement, while neglected or destructive habits reinforce limitation, distraction, and stagnation, illustrating that our daily routines are a reflection of our self-concept and a determinant of the life we create. Positive habits compound over time, producing exponential benefits, because the cumulative effect of small, consistent actions, whether in learning, productivity, health, or relationships, amplifies results far beyond what isolated effort or occasional bursts of focus could achieve. And it is this compounding nature that makes habits the most powerful lever for long-term transformation, demonstrating that meaningful change is rarely sudden or dramatic, but the product of steady, deliberate behavior repeated day after day. Habit formation also intersects with mindset, because beliefs about capability, discipline, and self-control influence our ability to initiate and sustain behaviors, and cultivating a growth-oriented, empowered mindset facilitates the creation, reinforcement, and persistence of habits that align with goals, while a fixed, self-limiting mindset undermines consistency, effort, and long-term progress, highlighting the intimate connection between thought patterns and repeated action. Habits also reduce decision fatigue, because automatic behaviors minimize the need for conscious deliberation, preserving cognitive energy for high-priority tasks and complex problem-solving. And when routines are intentionally structured to support goals, they create efficiency, reliability, and resilience, enabling sustained focus, persistent effort, and the incremental accumulation of results over time. The process of habit development requires patience, because meaningful behaviors take time to internalize, and the benefits are often delayed, invisible, or gradual, yet persistence in practice ensures that repetition eventually transforms conscious effort into automatic, self-reinforcing behavior, creating a foundation for consistent progress, personal mastery, and long-term achievement, illustrating that the discipline to persist through early discomfort is the gateway to lifelong advantage. Habits also shape motivation, because each repeated action provides feedback, progress, and reinforcement that strengthens commitment, confidence, and momentum, creating a self-reinforcing cycle in which effort produces results. Results reinforce belief, and belief fuels continued action. And it is through this compounding feedback loop that sustainable growth, resilience, and mastery emerge. Negative habits, by contrast, erode potential, distract from priorities, and amplify limitations, often operating unnoticed until their cumulative effects manifest as stagnation, missed opportunity, or undesirable outcomes. and the intentional identification, disruption, and replacement of counterproductive behaviors is essential to regain control, redirect energy, and ensure alignment between daily actions and long-term objectives. Habits are also a reflection of environment, because the cues, social influences, and structural conditions surrounding us shape behavior, and by deliberately designing our physical and social context to support desired routines, minimize friction for productive behavior, and create natural prompts for beneficial actions, we increase the likelihood of success, reduce reliance on willpower alone, and create conditions in which positive habits flourish while destructive patterns diminish, demonstrating the interplay between external structure and internal discipline. The cultivation of habits strengthens resilience because repeated exposure to disciplined routines, consistent effort, and the management of competing impulses builds mental toughness, persistence, and the capacity to act despite discomfort, distraction, or temporary lack of motivation, teaching that self-mastery is not a matter of occasional triumph, but of repeated practice, reinforced by structure and aligned with purpose, and that enduring success is inseparable from the habits that sustain it. Habits also accelerate learning, because repeated, deliberate engagement with skills, tasks, and challenges provides feedback, deepens understanding, and enables incremental improvement, illustrating that mastery emerges not from isolated effort, but from the compounding effect of consistent, purposeful repetition, and that the individual who designs their habits intentionally will naturally experience faster growth, greater competence, and more reliable results than the one who relies on sporadic motivation or willpower alone. Habit formation requires self-awareness because understanding the triggers, routines, and outcomes that govern existing behavior allows for deliberate adjustment, replacement, and reinforcement of desired patterns, and it is through this reflective practice that we gain control over automatic behaviors, align daily actions with long-term goals, and prevent unconscious patterns from undermining effort, progress, or fulfillment. Habits reinforce accountability because daily, repeated behaviors provide measurable evidence of commitment, consistency, and alignment with goals, and this visibility allows for course correction, feedback, and self-regulation, ensuring that action, intention, and outcome remain connected, while neglect of habitual practice erodes discipline, undermines progress, and leaves potential unrealized. Habits also shape identity over time, because repeated behaviors reinforce the narrative we tell ourselves about who we are, what we value, and what we are capable of achieving. And by consistently engaging in actions that align with our desired self-concept, we strengthen self-efficacy, confidence, and intrinsic motivation, illustrating that the life we live is a reflection of the habits we maintain, and that intentional, deliberate practice is a form of self-authorship. The most successful individuals understand that habits are not optional but foundational, because they determine the consistency of effort, the compounding of results, and the capacity to respond effectively to challenges, opportunities, and long-term goals, demonstrating that mastery, achievement, and personal growth are products not of random brilliance, but of carefully designed, intentional, and disciplined repetition. Ultimately, habits are the intersection of choice, discipline, and compounding effect, because each repeated action reinforces capability, focus, and resilience, and when aligned with meaningful objectives, they transform daily behavior into lasting impact, incremental growth into mastery, and potential into achievement, proving that the key to sustained success lies not in extraordinary effort, occasional inspiration, or fleeting motivation, but in the deliberate cultivation of habits that consistently guide behavior, shape identity, and compound results over time, creating a life defined by intentional action, measurable progress, and the fulfillment of true potential. Gratitude is the subtle yet profound force that transforms perspective, amplifies resilience, and enhances both emotional and practical outcomes, because the simple practice of acknowledging and appreciating the positive aspects of life, whether they are people, experiences, opportunities, or personal strengths, reshapes the way we interpret circumstances, influences our behavior, and increases the likelihood of both mental and physical well-being. And yet so often it is overlooked in the pursuit of achievement, success, and goal attainment, when in reality, gratitude serves as a foundational mindset that supports growth, perspective, and sustainable action, because the act of recognizing what is already present cultivates a sense of sufficiency, reduces anxiety about what is lacking, and creates a platform from which proactive effort can be applied more effectively and intentionally. Gratitude is transformative because it shifts focus from scarcity, limitation, or frustration toward abundance, possibility, and opportunity, and this shift in attention fundamentally alters emotional states, increasing optimism, satisfaction, and resilience, while simultaneously reducing stress, distraction, and the tendency to dwell on obstacles or setbacks, illustrating that the lens through which we interpret experiences can either hinder or accelerate personal growth and achievement, and that gratitude is a powerful tool for directing attention toward constructive, empowering, and motivating perspectives. The practice of gratitude also strengthens relationships because acknowledging and appreciating the contributions, support, and presence of others fosters connection, trust, and goodwill, encouraging reciprocal positivity, collaboration, and shared effort. And the consistent expression of gratitude enhances social bonds, deepens communication, and creates a culture of mutual respect and cooperation, demonstrating that emotional awareness and acknowledgement of value in others is not merely a nicety, but a strategic habit that fosters personal and professional growth, influence, and opportunity. Gratitude amplifies resilience because it encourages a focus on what has been achieved, what resources are available, and what lessons have been learned even in difficult circumstances. And this focus creates a mental framework that reinforces adaptive coping, problem solving, and the ability to persist through challenges, highlighting that the perception of abundance and opportunity rather than deficit and limitation equips individuals to engage proactively, act decisively, and maintain consistent effort toward long-term goals despite obstacles. The practice of gratitude also enhances self-awareness and mindfulness because it requires intentional reflection on personal experiences, the recognition of positive elements, and the acknowledgement of both internal strengths and external resources. And this reflective habit strengthens cognitive clarity, emotional regulation, and attentional focus, enabling more deliberate, thoughtful action and reducing impulsivity, distraction, or reactive behavior, demonstrating that gratitude is not only an emotional practice, but a cognitive tool that supports effective decision-making, strategic action, and personal growth. Cultivating gratitude involves noticing the small details, the everyday moments, and the seemingly mundane aspects of life that are often overlooked yet contribute to well-being. Learning to appreciate incremental progress, consistent effort, and incremental achievements, and recognizing that every success, no matter how minor, is a product of effort, resources, and opportunity, fostering a mindset in which action, persistence, and effort are reinforced rather than taken for granted, and where momentum is amplified through acknowledgement and appreciation of the ongoing process of growth and development. Gratitude is intimately linked with perspective, because the ability to see challenges in the context of growth, learning, or opportunity, rather than purely as obstacles or failures, creates a mental framework that supports persistence, resilience, and proactive engagement, demonstrating that the cultivation of a grateful mindset can transform setbacks into catalysts for improvement, obstacles into lessons, and difficulties into opportunities for skill development, self-reflection, and increased capacity for action. Gratitude strengthens motivation because recognizing progress, achievements, and support reinforces the value of effort, inspires further action, and cultivates a positive feedback loop in which effort is met with acknowledgement, progress generates appreciation, and appreciation fuels continued engagement, illustrating that the practice of gratitude is both an emotional and behavioral multiplier that amplifies commitment, productivity, and sustained growth. Gratitude also enhances physical and mental well-being, because numerous studies demonstrate that those who regularly engage in grateful reflection experience lower stress levels, improved immune function, greater emotional stability, and enhanced satisfaction, highlighting that this practice has measurable impacts on energy, focus, and capacity for sustained effort, and that the integration of gratitude into daily life is not merely a spiritual or philosophical exercise, but a practical tool for optimizing overall performance and personal effectiveness. Practicing gratitude develops humility and perspective, because it encourages recognition of external support, circumstances, and contributions that facilitate success, reminding us that achievements are rarely solitary or isolated, and this awareness fosters balanced self-assessment, grounded confidence, and relational intelligence, strengthening both personal development and social influence. Gratitude also cultivates optimism, because focusing on what is present, what is working, and what is available directs attention toward solutions, opportunities, and possibilities rather than problems, limitations, or failures, which in turn promotes proactive thinking, creativity, and strategic action, demonstrating that the habitual acknowledgement of positive aspects of life reshapes perception in ways that enhance resilience, decision-making, and long-term achievement. Integrating gratitude into daily practice requires deliberate effort, because habitual attention often defaults to problems, deficits, or challenges, yet by consciously reflecting on at least a few things to appreciate each day, whether through journaling, verbal acknowledgement, or mental recognition, we train the mind to notice abundance, opportunity, and progress, and over time, this consistent practice strengthens neural pathways associated with positive perception, motivation, and emotional regulation, illustrating that gratitude is a skill that can be developed and optimized for long-term benefit. Gratitude fosters adaptability, because the recognition of value in what is available, rather than lamenting what is missing, encourages creative problem-solving, resourcefulness, and proactive action, and this mindset allows individuals to leverage existing resources, relationships, and circumstances more effectively, demonstrating that acknowledging and appreciating what is present is not a passive activity, but a strategic enabler of opportunity, decision-making, and forward momentum. Gratitude also encourages reflective learning, because appreciating what has been achieved or provided encourages examination of what contributed to success, what lessons can be carried forward, and what behaviors, actions, or strategies are worth repeating, creating a virtuous cycle in which reflection, appreciation, and action reinforce one another to accelerate growth, competence, and results. Gratitude strengthens personal agency, because recognizing that opportunities, resources, and support exist within one's control or influence fosters a proactive mindset, and when paired with action, focus, and responsibility, it transforms acknowledgement into strategic leverage, enabling individuals to maximize outcomes, create opportunity, and sustain momentum toward meaningful goals. The integration of gratitude into personal and professional life also improves emotional intelligence, because the recognition of value, effort, and contribution in oneself and others enhances empathy, relational skills, and communication, creating environments that are collaborative, supportive, and conducive to mutual growth and success. And this relational benefit reinforces the impact of gratitude beyond internal perception, extending it to tangible influence in communities, teams, and partnerships. Ultimately, gratitude is the foundation for resilience, perspective, motivation, and relational strength, because it cultivates an appreciative lens that sees opportunity in challenges, acknowledges progress amid difficulty, reinforces effort through recognition, and nurtures connection and collaboration, demonstrating that the deliberate, consistent practice of gratitude is not merely a positive habit, but a transformative principle that amplifies personal growth, emotional strength, and long-term success, proving that those who integrate gratitude into their mindset, behaviors, and daily routines create lives of higher impact, fulfillment, and resilience, shaping perception, action, and outcomes in ways that extend far beyond the immediate acknowledgement of what is good, and creating a compounding effect in which recognition, reflection, and appreciation fuel continued growth, consistent effort, and meaningful achievement. Actionable growth is the culmination of all principles of personal development, the point at which responsibility, mindset, habits, focus, consistency, gratitude, and deliberate effort intersect to create measurable, sustainable change. Because true transformation is not the product of knowledge alone, nor of intention in isolation, but of integrated, persistent, and conscious action applied with clarity and purpose. And yet so many individuals stalled at the threshold of potential, paralyzed by fear, doubt, or the illusion that preparation must be perfect before engagement, when in reality, growth accelerates the moment we step decisively into practice, applying lessons, experimenting with strategies, and learning from feedback, because each choice, effort, and adjustment compounds over time to build competence, resilience, and momentum, demonstrating that the path to mastery is forged through doing rather than merely thinking or planning. Growth is accelerated by responsibility, because acknowledging that our circumstances, choices, and outcomes are largely shaped by our own decisions empowers us to act, adapt, and learn, rather than surrendering control to external factors, other people, or the randomness of life. And this ownership fuels action, persistence, and the courage to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and challenge, illustrating that those who embrace accountability move faster, more decisively, and with greater self-efficacy than those who externalize blame, excuses, or limitations. Mindset is a critical driver of growth, because the internal framework through which we interpret challenges, setbacks, and opportunities determines not only how we respond, but also the energy, focus, and creativity we bring to every situation. And cultivating a growth-oriented, resilient, and empowered mindset transforms obstacles into lessons, adversity into insight, and effort into leverage, while a fixed or disempowered mindset diminishes initiative, narrows perspective, and limits potential, demonstrating that sustainable growth requires alignment of thought with action, and that the mind is both a filter and a multiplier of effort. Habits are the daily embodiment of growth, because consistent, intentional behaviors create the architecture through which skills, knowledge, and results compound, and repeated action aligned with purpose develops both competence and character, whereas inconsistent or destructive habits undermine momentum, erode confidence, and dilute outcomes, showing that the power of growth lies not only in the occasional leap, but in the disciplined, repeated steps taken day after day, gradually accumulating into mastery, achievement, and measurable transformation. Focus amplifies growth because concentrated attention on high-value tasks, priorities, and decisions allows energy to be applied efficiently, reduces wasted effort, and enables deeper learning, skill acquisition, and problem-solving. And when combined with clarity of purpose, focus ensures that effort translates into meaningful outcomes, creating a compounding effect in which persistent, directed action produces far greater results than scattered, reactive, or superficial engagement, demonstrating that attention is both a resource and a multiplier of potential. Consistency is the engine of growth, because repeated, deliberate effort produces momentum, reinforces learning, and develops resilience, illustrating that persistent action, even small or incremental, yields cumulative impact over time, while inconsistency dissipates energy, slows progress, and undermines confidence and the ability to maintain engagement in the face of challenge, monotony, or resistance is what separates sustained achievement from temporary or superficial results. Gratitude accelerates growth by shaping perception, increasing resilience, and enhancing motivation, because the recognition of resources, progress, opportunities, and support creates a mindset oriented toward possibility, constructive action, and adaptive learning, while fostering relationships, trust, and collaboration that further enhance outcomes, demonstrating that an appreciative lens is both an internal and external multiplier, influencing emotional, cognitive, and social domains in ways that directly support the achievement of long-term goals. Deliberate action integrates all these elements because knowledge, skills, mindset, habits, focus, consistency, and gratitude produce tangible transformation only when applied, tested, and refined in real-world practice. And growth occurs most effectively when effort is purposeful, aligned with priorities, and reinforced by reflection, feedback, and adjustment, creating a continuous cycle of learning, adaptation, and improvement that compounds over time into mastery, capability, and fulfillment. Risk-taking is inherent to growth, because advancing toward meaningful goals inevitably involves uncertainty, discomfort, and the potential for failure. Yet embracing calculated risk, learning from mistakes, and adapting strategies strengthens resilience, accelerates skill acquisition, and expands opportunity, demonstrating that growth is inseparable from courageous action, strategic experimentation, and the willingness to step beyond comfort zones, because each challenge navigated successfully reinforces competence, confidence, and momentum, while each failure offers insight, adjustment, and a deeper understanding of what is required to succeed. Reflection enhances growth by converting experience into insight, because the act of reviewing actions, outcomes, and decisions allows for identification of patterns, recognition of successes, correction of missteps, and refinement of strategy, and this deliberate assessment transforms mere experience into learning, accelerating the trajectory of improvement and ensuring that each step taken contributes maximally to long-term development. Growth also requires adaptability because the landscape of life, work, and personal development is constantly evolving, and those who remain rigid, resistant, or narrowly focused risk stagnation, while those who adjust, learn, and iterate maintain momentum, relevance, and effectiveness, demonstrating that sustainable growth is not linear but dynamic, requiring continuous recalibration, responsiveness to feedback, and openness to new perspectives, skills, and approaches. Accountability reinforces growth because it creates external and internal mechanisms for follow-through, evaluation, and improvement, ensuring that intentions are converted into action, effort is sustained, and outcomes are monitored and optimized, and this framework increases self-discipline, reliability, and strategic alignment, illustrating that growth is strengthened by both personal integrity and the deliberate use of structures that support persistent progress. Self-awareness underpins growth because understanding strengths, weaknesses, values, motivations, and cognitive patterns informs decision-making, guides habit formation, prioritizes effort, and enhances relationships, allowing individuals to act with precision, align behavior with purpose, and continuously refine strategy, showing that insight into the self is a catalyst for both personal and professional development, and that effective growth requires not only effort, but accurate knowledge of one's capacities and tendencies. The compounding effect of incremental improvement is a hallmark of growth, because consistent action, learning, reflection, and adaptation gradually accumulate into significant capability, influence, and achievement, illustrating that the accumulation of small, intentional steps produces outcomes far greater than sporadic or extreme effort, and that the architecture of sustainable growth is built on repetition, refinement, and persistence rather than sporadic brilliance. Perseverance is essential to growth, because obstacles, setbacks, and challenges are inevitable, and the capacity to maintain focus, apply effort, and adapt strategies despite difficulty defines the trajectory of success. demonstrating that the difference between those who achieve and those who falter is not the absence of adversity, but the presence of enduring commitment. Resilience and determination. Purpose aligns growth, because understanding why we act, what we value, and the ultimate objectives we seek provides direction, motivation, and coherence across all efforts, ensuring that energy is invested wisely, decisions are consistent with long-term goals, and action contributes to meaningful outcomes, highlighting that intentionality amplifies the impact of effort and accelerates the realization of potential. Collaboration enhances growth, because engaging with others, seeking mentorship, sharing knowledge, and leveraging collective insight accelerates learning, expands perspective, and multiplies opportunity, demonstrating that individual growth is both enhanced and accelerated through meaningful connection, communication, and cooperative effort. Ultimately, Chapter 15 demonstrates that the essence of growth lies in integration. The harmonization of mindset, habits, action, responsibility, focus, consistency, gratitude, reflection, adaptability, and perseverance into a coherent system of deliberate, intentional, and sustained engagement with life, because it is the consistent, thoughtful application of these principles that transforms potential into achievement, intention into measurable progress, and effort into mastery, proving that true growth is an ongoing, dynamic process that requires conscious attention, courage, and commitment, and that those who cultivate these practices with discipline, purpose, and persistence unlock the ability to shape their life, realize their potential, and create lasting, meaningful impact in both personal and professional realms, establishing a foundation of competence, resilience, and fulfillment that compounds over time, producing not only results but also the character, insight, and capacity necessary to navigate future challenges and opportunities with confidence, clarity, and deliberate agency.